idea you had that in you, buddy.
Everyone, and welcome to the work session, Rutherford County School Board. First order of business is Pledge of Allegiance, led tonight by Board Member Coy Young. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome again to everyone. First, the next thing is the approval of the agenda. Anybody want anything changed from that? Yes, sir. Okay, we'll move on to that.
That was those snow days to pay them for the days that we cancel school. We waited till later to do it because they only get 6 by policy, so this adds the other days. It would actually add an extra day probably for Oakland and Blackman because they were out an extra day, you know, for different reasons, but that's what that's for.
Okay.
We were trying to wait to hope it's over, but you never know, do you?
Anything else on the consent agenda? Anybody want anything moved? And let's go over to page 4, I believe. We may or may not have some visitors on Thursday night, don't know. And recognition, Mr. Director, we got some exciting things to do.
We do. We got the some Middle Tennessee sectional basketball tournament winners. That's Christiana Middle and Rock Springs Middle. They should be here. And our national champion, Blackman High School varsity cheerleaders should be here. Riverdale state champion girls basketball could not come this time, so we'll try to catch them next time.
The cheerleaders going to do a demonstration? Any flips?
I don't know. They're good.
Probably not much room, so.
Riverdale girls, Ms. Michael, I think if you might want to give them a call, but I think they have tentatively agreed to the 4th of April. Okay, all right. I should have known. You know better than I, but you can check them out. The archery program, Mr. Director, you want to mention that?
I think Mr. Eric Bonanno is going to be here, I think, Thursday night to speak.
Okay, brings us to number 9, special course request.
Okay, the state has changed it again where you have to go back to special course. So the instruction department is requesting permission to make an application to offer credit for special courses under the following guidelines. Rule 520-1-3-.05-2A. Local school systems may offer special courses not listed in the state's list, 521-3.06, on an experimental basis. The Commissioner of Education must approve each course in advance each year, and Rutherford County High Schools are requesting approval for the following special courses. Ms. K. Martin compiled this for us. American Heroines, Art, History, AVID 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is a Smyrna High program basically, Entrepreneurship Foundations, Ethical Leadership Seminar, Fairy and Folk Tales, Global Diplomacy, Mythology, Native American History, Organic Chemistry, Positive Psychology, Shakespeare, Strength Conditioning 1, 2, and 3, Survey of Pop Culture and Tennessee History, the U.S. Presidency, and Writing Labs 1 and 2. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the 2018-19 special course request for Rutherford County High Schools as presented. We used to could present it, and it was for 3 years, and it became permanent, but they've switched that. So you're going to start seeing this on a regular basis, probably.
Let's go to my news request for special courses. Do they normally come along with a textbook, or how is the curriculum designed for these, and what would we as board members need to do if we wanted to look at the curriculum for any of these particular courses?
I would contact K. Martin because when we send it in, we have to send in a syllabus. You have to see who is teaching it, what that teacher's certification is. It's on the state application. It goes to the commissioner, and they will list on that application materials or textbooks that's used for that course, because all that has to be submitted to the state.
I assume that all of these would be like
They are. They're all elective. But they may fit under something like I see several social studies. I see some English language arts probably there. You know, remember every high school student has to have an elective focus, which is courses above the state required courses. So you'll sometimes find students taking that if that's an interesting. Tennessee history may show up and be a regular course by the state before long if some of this legislation passes.
So how many elective offerings do we have, including this?
You've got a lot, probably next month, you know, every year you get the list of all the courses we offer, and some of those are elective also. So, you know, I hate to venture a guess. It's a lot.
I'm going to be like Mr. Odom. There's a large number of them. I would not venture to guess the number that we have available, but all course codes that we offer will be on one of our future board meetings, and you'll be able to see those.
The different schools might offer different electives.
Yeah, some of these
Some variation.
special courses are offered at only one school.
For instance, CTE courses are really elective very often to the school. We have a lot of them that are the same, usually the health sciences and businesses at every school, but in other schools, they might be the only school offering that. But it would still be as long as it's in a CTE pathway.
And I began to question a little bit to see where that went, but it's a continuation of AP psychology. It's the senior level of that.
If I wanted to see an outline of the curriculum or what have you for any of these courses, say even prior to our vote on Thursday night, would that be possible?
I think we should be able to get that together. I'll talk to Ms. Marks about
She usually
getting that
does.
because we submitted those. I'll see if I can get that for you earlier tomorrow,
Okay. You want me to reach out to you later and let you know which ones I'd like to look at?
if you would like to.
Organic chemistry is one of them, right?
Yeah, that's the one I don't mess up with this homework all the time, right?
Any other questions about number
If there's
9?
specific ones, just let me know.
Okay, I will, thank you.
Any other questions about number 9? Number 10.
Number 10 is the 2017-18 tenure recommendation. The following teachers meet the criteria for tenure in accordance with the new tenure law. Remember, they've changed teacher tenure. It's just not time anymore. It requires performance. You have to, 1, hold a valid Tennessee teaching license. You have to serve in Rutherford County schools for 5 years or 45 months within a 7-year period, the last 2 in a regular and not an interim position. You also must demonstrate an overall performance of above expectation or significantly above expectations on the team evaluation during the last 2 consecutive years of a 5-year period. That's a 4 or a 5 on the effect scores. Or if held tenure under the previous guidelines and return to Rutherford County School, you meet the 2-year probationary period and tenure is reactivated. And then we have the list of names.
The name's on our website, Ms. Michaels?
Yeah, this is.
Okay. You might want to look at page 6. The third name on the list is a problem. I don't know if we want to ask the director anything about that or not. We okay there, that Anthony? We're all right there, you think?
I think we'll.
Okay, well, I don't think there's any question about the rest of them, but does any board member wish these to be read?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have this question, though. Wasn't the 5 years on all of these candidates actually completed in the 16-17 school year?
But you didn't have the effect score back.
Right.
Remember, you have to have a 4 or a 5, and they were so late releasing the effect scores, that was why it was late.
And the effect scores dependent on the testing data, you know, as it weighs in.
The 2 previous testing cycles.
I think it should be pointed out, the patience and just good attitude of all of these educators, that here we are in March of 2018, and they should have had this assurance if the state could get testing correct back in the summer of 2017. And we're just now able to grant this because of that.
We looked at it in the fall, but if you remember the anomalies,
Right?
and we had teachers, Blackman High was one of those.
Absolutely.
And there was a number of those teachers whose effect scores changed when they corrected it because, then they just had higher effects. So
Absolutely.
we could have presented some of this earlier probably, but it really doesn't make, it's no more money or anything to the teacher.
Yeah.
But I don't want to grant it and then have to take it away.
Sure, absolutely.
So wait until the state got their act together.
So a guidance counselor gets their effect score from,
Usually they get a choice in some, but it's typically from the whole school level, and they may choose a particular areas. You have some choices in the team. You want to explain any up to them, Dr. Anthony? I mean, about where their effect score comes from in a special area.
Right. Part of the overall score comes from their evaluation from their administrator or their administrative team. The other part comes from certain criteria that the state allows them to get percentages on, such as they can pick ACT, they may pick TN Ready, ELA, those kind of things. So depending on what they're teaching, they're able to pick their percentages on those areas that they're tested.
If you have an EOC, you must use that, though. If you're a teacher teaching one of the 4 Englishes or the 4 maths, you must use it, or U.S. history, because that's an end-of-course assessment by the state.
so if you're not teaching anything like guidance, you're just getting it from the administrative team?
Part of their percentages would come from the overall school composite score. So each school gets an overall score.
Typically, they'll incorporate part of the graduation rate or something because that is one of their target areas or something.
Any other questions about the tenure list? Number 11, insurance update. Any news?
Tomorrow.
Mr. Sam Vigan, I go Thursday. We'll have information for you Thursday night.
Okay.
Set the rate.
Beg pardon?
They're going to recommend the rate Thursday, I think, so you're going to know.
I'm sure they'll cut that. I'm confident that we will have a reduction in the rate.
I haven't seen that yet.
No, me either. Director's update, Mr. Director.
Today, read something this afternoon, says, this is a release, Governor Bill Haslam has proposed an amendment to the 2018-19 state budget that includes $30 million to improve school safety. The proposal could be considered by the General Assembly in the coming weeks. The funding includes $25 million in non-recurring and $5.2 million in recurring school safety grants, according to the release. And if you do the math, I went back and looked at the state report card. We had 999,701 last year. So if they distribute it by ADM, it's about $30 per student. The recurring would be about $5 per student each year. Now, will there be some variations and maybe smaller counties or some of those with not as much ability to pay get more? That's certainly possible. Because I had no information other than just do the simple math, divide students into total proposed amounts. But, I had been told in a meeting with the commissioner that they were really working on something for that. So, Mr. Clardy, I think we told you the other day, we were looking at some things that we can probably do for safety in the schools with this one-time money to enhance our safety in each of our schools. So I hope we get at least the $30, what I hope.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Ms. Moore, number 13, TLN. Okay, Mr. Holliday, federal.
2 things that I'll bring to light. Senator Corker and Senator Alexander introduced a bill that would allow every dollar from the federal government to be allocated to school safety. I think this was generally in response to the Parkland school shooting, and it may or may not make its way through Congress, but it certainly emphasized a commitment by our senators toward school safety, and we've seen that again from the governor. The other thing is, if board members have not already taken the time to watch the 60-minute interview of Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, I think it's worth each of our time. I think it's very enlightening about the personal motivations and direction that the Secretary has, and in some cases, the lack of direction.
Any question for Ms. Moore or Mr. Holliday? General discussion by board members. I've got a couple of things, but let me yield the floor to you. Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is the time to talk about this, but I don't remember the last time that we or SROs were added to our school facilities, and I don't know if this is a conversation that we have with the sheriff or if we have with the county commission, but we saw here the last couple of days what an SRO can do on campus, and with especially with our high schools becoming so large, and especially as much square footage as there is to cover, I certainly would like for us to at least propose or try to get an additional SRO on at each campus.
Two at high schools.
And I would personally like to see 4, but that might be too big a jump too quick. But an additional, at least an additional 1 at our high schools, and especially with Blackman Middle and Oakland Middle, that with so many more feet to cover, that an additional 1 at each middle school, or at least at the larger middle schools. I certainly would like to pursue that or propose it or see where we can go with it, but I think a larger SRO presence would certainly make our campuses more safe.
Holliday?
I had not heard Mr. Blair's suggestion until just this moment, but I would have to echo. I think that the circumstances that exist at Blackman Middle School with the annex facility, as well as the circumstances that will soon exist at Oakland Middle School, the population and the detachment of those annex buildings, and of course that brings to mind the Oakland and Riverdale campuses. We've often spoken of how sprawling those campuses are and how there are separations between the buildings, and to be able to have additional SROs in those areas where we see physical circumstances that would require that certainly seems like a reasonable expectation. Mr. Blair, great suggestion.
Well, and for Oakland and Riverdale, they might make an exception and go 4 because of how large the campuses are. It may be for the others that are more enclosed, add an additional 1 and give us 4 at those schools and 3 at the other large high schools. So I don't know how to pursue that, Mr. Odom.
Yeah, of course, 3 we furnish, and the others are in the sheriff's budget. In the past, sheriffs have basically said, we can't take people off parole to do it. The commission would have to probably fund more or something like that.
Mr. and Chairman Jordan, having served on the commission, would probably be our best guidance to pursue that, but since he's smiling, maybe I assumed too much, but I would certainly think it's something that we could.
I'm not that familiar with every single building and how they do it. I know Blackman and Oakland and Riverdale, they have 4 assistant principals, right? And they space them around the building. So that's the assistant principal. So you've got somebody there who's not contained in a classroom. But you don't have an SRO because we only got 2, right?
Yes, sir.
So it would take at least 3 to, and at Riverdale, for instance, I mean, and soon at these middle schools you mentioned, there's going to be at least 3 major centers of students on that campus. I'm talking about, and really at Riverdale, 4. So, yeah, I'm kind of the gym, and there's a couple hundred people in the gym all day long, band and athletics, PE. So 4 is not an unreasonable request. Might not get it, but it's not an unreasonable request.
If we don't ask,
Well, the answer will always be no. Yes, ma'am.
And I appreciate this conversation. I'm glad you brought this up. And Mr. Blair, I concur with Mr. Holiday. SROs are definitely a premium, I think. But kind of carrying that even a step further, because thinking about this a lot, and obviously it's been weighing on everybody's minds. And we're seeing so much input and feedback on social media. I'm sure the rest of you, like myself, have gotten individual reach outs from parents and things saying, really in some cases kind of challenging us. Yeah, we know we're doing all this, but there's more to be looked at. I really would like to see us as board address that one specific subject in a meeting, perhaps even a special call meeting, and maybe lay some groundwork before that. But, I've actually gotten, because I did post something on social media on one of the school parents' pages and said, give me suggestions. Tell me what's on your mind. What do you think we could do different? And got into a conversation even with a client of mine last week that turns out to be one of my constituents with children at Christiana Middle, who rattled off a couple of things that was like, wow, I never even thought about that. And I got that input because that person had worked as a secretary in one of our schools. And again, we do have, with all the schools we've got, and they're different, they all have different needs. When we start looking at how we're going to decide, for instance, how to spend the state's money and everything, I think we really need to do that collectively, and then also do kind of an audit perhaps of all of our individual schools to start prioritizing where those needs are the most significant. Does that make sense?
You'll have a little bit on the $5 per the annual.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I think, too, we need to start evaluating and see where our needs are. Then once we establish that, bring the sheriff's department in and get their input also. And then we can go to the county commission and ask for what we need. But until we establish what those guidelines are, I don't know how we ask for money.
Mr. Kubley is our safety person, Ms. Michaels. If you want to make a note, we can have a conversation with him, because we do meet with the SROs and principals and all, too.
And we could have a special call meeting for that effect as soon as we finish with our other special call meeting. We've got about every day full, haven't we? Something that Mr. Holliday brought up this morning on his WGNS radio gig this morning, where he was paid the usual salary. He said, and quite right, that we don't discuss publicly, for various reasons, our security plans. And because we're trying to keep those plans away from the people that we don't want them to have the plans. But on the other hand, it would be nice, I think, at some point, if parents knew how much money they have spent, the taxpayers have spent, on security, and how much we care about that general area. It's probably unlimited. It's a difficult problem. And something else, no one has mentioned it here, and I don't probably do not need to have this discussion tonight, so maybe I shouldn't even bring it up, but I will anyway. We are having considerable, I assume you're getting the same thing, from taxpayers, constituents, who have some sort of opinion, usually negative, on arming teachers. And that's something that maybe we need to think about taking a stand on as well. And I'm not saying I don't want to do that tonight, and maybe we're certainly unprepared for it, I guess. But that is something that the state legislature, I think the legislation has pretty much stalled, has it not? do we know for sure it's not going to get out of committee? Either in the Senate and the House bill or both.
But
They're,
I'm glad you brought it up. I do think it behooves conversation.
it's worth a conversation for sure. But okay. Any other comments on that? And anything else, board members, that you might want to discuss right here? I've got a couple of things which will only take a moment or two. First of all, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to anybody who, particularly our faculty, our students, our director, and others who helped our students during the walkout protest, whatever you want to call it, last week. I think we reacted, when you look at other places and then you look at our a few hundred children that took part, I think we were at the top of the list in behavior, as far as I know, and I'm extremely proud of them. Also, I want to thank Ms. Michaels and anyone else who had anything to do with our interviews, which I thought all three were excellent, and the meal and the general meeting, and of course all of you played a major part in that. And Ms. Michaels, we continue to come up with more reasons to be indebted to you.
Indeed.
So there's another one. Also, on a more serious note, in talking about the director search, I don't know what you all did or how we of course are forbidden, and rightly so, I guess, to discuss it. But in my case, I'll just say what I did. After I left here last night, after Mr. Zago's excellent interview, I went home and totaled up my points on all three candidates. I reread all my notes that I had made on all three of them. And then I went back and looked at the resumes that we had. And frankly, I don't know any other way to say it. This is so close, and these candidates are so outstanding. I am just simply not ready to comfortably vote tomorrow night. And I apologize for that. Maybe I'm the only one that feels that way. But I feel like that although I know, according to Mr. Reed, I can do this, but I don't want to do this if you all are just really opposed to this. I want to delay this vote until after spring break, perhaps April 2nd, 3rd, right in that general neighborhood, and just if for no other reason, to give us some more time to study these three outstanding people. And with your permission, I'm going to do that, which means we will cancel tomorrow night. And Ms. Michaels didn't know that until a few minutes ago that we possibly were going to do that. But with your permission, I'd like to do that, and I'm hoping that somebody will have something to say that might support me at this point.
And I would agree completely that we definitely need to postpone it. We need more time. But did you have a specific?
Are we going to go ahead and look at a specific date then, after we get back from spring break?
I hadn't planned on doing that. We may have to, here's our schedule. And Ms. Michaels, maybe, or some of you can help me. What? Right, but we can have. Well, are you saying? I obviously want to do everything as legally as without question. Can we not have that as an agenda item on the 4th? Do we have to have a special called meeting to elect a director? Mr. Reed? Okay. The regular board meeting would be April 4. Any feedback from anybody on that?
Sounds reasonable to me. I wouldn't object.
Yeah.
I hate to drag it out too much further, but April 4th.
Yeah, I agree. I know we've got, of course, a conference to go to right after that, and I would do next week, but it's spring break, and a lot of our people will be gone, and I'd just soon go to the following week. Well, thank you for that consideration. I appreciate that very much. I think we've done the right thing there. Yes, 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 just add that as an agenda item. I give, whatever you think is best, whatever you want to put it in there, plug it in. Okay, thank you.
Does it have to be the first item, or that's only when you're renewing?
Renew the contract or extend a contract, you have to be the first item on the agenda by state law. I'd go ahead and make this the first thing on the agenda, just to make sure there's no question about it. So the first thing on the agenda for the meeting on April 4th would be Director of Schools. For the April 4th meeting.
Okay. Mr. Reed, as long as you're standing there, so aren't you sorry you got up?
I can sit back down.
No. On that night, okay, and I think I'm reasonably certain that I misspoke last night, which I know comes as a shock to everyone. After the ballots are counted, and when and if, and I assume that we will, come up with somebody with 4 votes or more, you or someone is going to announce how each board member ranked the candidates. Is that correct?
I think what we have done previously, and we'll do whatever the board wants to do that night with respect to how it counts its votes and how we handle them. What we've done previously is we'll hand out sheets. Everyone ranks their candidates in order of preference, who you think you would be your first choice, who would be your second choice, and who would be your third choice. We then count, and then you sign them. You sign those. We'll probably date it. Then those will be tallied by Joyce Michaels, myself, and probably somebody else. And then we will announce the results of the tally. And then you will know at that time whether you have candidate X has 3 votes for number 1, or candidate Y has 3 votes for number 1, or whether you have a clear majority or not, because you may not have a clear majority.
Takes 4 at least.
It takes 4 for a clear majority. All we do is just tell you the results of the tally. That does not determine who becomes director of schools or who's offered the position. It's up to the board at that point to make a motion on the floor, as you normally would do, to nominate someone as the director of schools, to offer them the position. That motion has to be seconded, and then there's discussion on that. So there could be motions to amend. There could be discussion about maybe having someone else's name put into it other than the people who got the most votes in the tally. So, because it's your decision with respect to who director of schools is, and the board is ultimately the decision maker in regard all aspects in that sense. If you, at some point when we get ready to take a vote, if there's a motion to appoint someone director of schools, and there's a second to that motion, and you take a vote, and there's a vote of 4 or more to offer that someone the position as director of schools, that at that time you have made an offer on behalf of the board to extend that director of schools position to that individual. So that's only after you've had a motion, a second, and majority vote of the Board of Education at that point. So the sheets that you fill out where you rank you rank your preference, and we may have to do it more than once. Years past, one time we did it 3 or 4 times, and we had TV cameras and all that years past for it. But the sheets that you sign will be available for media to look at and public to look. They're public records, so if anyone wants to look at those, they can look at those. So if they want to know how any particular board member ranked the candidates, that's something that the media will be able to get to look at, or any member of the public can look at. So all that will be very public.
I suggest after, assuming there is a motion when we come back, and a second, and we vote, that can be a roll call vote.
It could be a roll call. It could be, you can do either A or nay, or by roll call. Either way.
Okay. All right.
One point of clarification, if I may. It's not actually an offer that we are making in the vote, but it is that we would enter into negotiations for a contract. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. It's an offer to enter into negotiations for a contract.
Right.
until the contract is negotiated between the board and whoever that person is, and there's an agreement reached that comes back to the board that you ultimately approve the contract, you still don't have a director of schools.
Right. Thank you.
So it has to come back for a contract to get approved by the board.
We have already been given a contract to review, but obviously we don't have a candidate yet, so we haven't done it.
I would say, look at your contracts. I gave you the same contract we have for Mr. Odom.
Right.
So you see what one has looked like before. If you have any comments or changes, and you want to make those to me, you're welcome to call my office and make those, and we can obviously make them at the board level too. But do take a look at it. If there's anything you need to change or want to change, we can address it.
Any other questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you, Mr. Reed. Appreciate it very much. Anything else on general discussion, board members? Okay, thank you so much for your input and help. We are adjourned.